This is an old industrial area in Longgang, Shenzhen. Many factories here have been demolished and turned into ruins due to the industrial building movement led by the Shenzhen authorities. Some factories are still standing but are empty, with big demolition signs on their walls, indicating they will soon face the same fate. Actually, it's not just Longgang. Many once thriving industrial areas in Shenzhen have turned into this desolate scene. These ruins seem to signal the end of an era. Let's follow a local netizen's video to see the current situation in Shenzhen.
Up ahead is the Shenzhen industrial zone. This is the largest and oldest industrial zone in Xi'an. I've heard that this industrial zone is about to be completely demolished. Factories here started operating in the early 1990s. There were two paper factories, a garment factory, and several electronics factories. As time went by, after 2010, this area gradually turned into a garment factory zone. Until this year, before the demolition, it was almost a garment city. Now we can see that this industrial zone, along this road, has been mostly demolished. The industrial zone has nearly turned into a vacant lot. Only a few factory buildings here are still standing. Some people say that the demolition of the Shenzhen industrial zone marks the end of an old era. It is said that 6.3 billion yuan will be invested to create a new energy industrial park here. All the factory buildings will be replaced with buildings over 10 stories high, forming a brand new high-tech industrial park. Actually, it's not just Shenzhen. Even the adjacent Zhaojin industrial zone is no exception. So this area will become a new technology industrial park in the future.
The vlogger shows the demolition status of the Shangcheng industrial zone, a typical example of Shenzhen's industrial building movement that started in 2022. In the video, we can clearly see banners on the wall stating that Phase 2 of the industrial building project at the Shiyan headquarters economic zone has started. We can also see big demolition signs sprayed on the remaining buildings. Shenzhen, known as China's first industrial city, has benefited from China's manufacturing industry. Shenzhen's manufacturing industry once helped China achieve its world factory status, and manufacturing transformed Shenzhen from a small fishing village into a renowned metropolis. However, after more than 40 years of development and several transformations, Shenzhen is now in a volatile era. On August 26, 1980, the Shenzhen Special Economic Zone was officially established. In its early days, Shenzhen leveraged special policies, utilizing funds and industry transfers from Hong Kong, forming a shop in the front, factory in the back model. It relied on labor-intensive light industry, assembling supplied materials and processing customer-supplied samples. With this type of trade, it developed numerous manufacturing industrial parks. In the 1990s, high-tech enterprises and supporting industries, led by electronics and computers, rapidly developed in the city. By 2008, Guangdong Province, where Shenzhen is located, initiated a strategy called Cage for Birds. It eliminated low-end industries and promoted industrial upgrading. Against this backdrop, many companies relocated their factories out of Shenzhen. Meanwhile, Shenzhen started building a lot of office buildings and developed the so-called headquarters economy. Data shows that from 2008 to 2016, as many as 40,000 companies left Shenzhen, including some Fortune 500 companies. The so-called Cage for Birds is essentially a government-led industrial upgrading, but it backfired on both companies and the city's development. This rapid deindustrialization not only broke the entire industrial chain, but also caused the manufacturing sector to hollow out. However, manufacturing is the driving force behind Shenzhen's economic development. Some say that Shenzhen's Cage for Birds strategy aimed to drive away low-end manufacturing and make room for high-end manufacturing, the Golden Phoenix. But the reality is, the birds were driven away and the Golden Phoenix hasn't come, leaving only empty cages. These empty industrial parks have become a burden for the government. Shenzhen's Cage for Birds strategy pushed out some manufacturing, and the subsequent US-China trade war and the 3 years of the pandemic dealt the final blow. Many old factories closed or relocated, leaving behind rows of empty factories and deserted industrial parks. Now, to retain more manufacturing enterprises, the Shenzhen government seems to have come up with another brilliant idea: industrial buildings. Industrial buildings refer to a different model from traditional industrial factories. This industrial building model involves moving production, office, R&D, and design operations into high-rise buildings. Specifically, it means transferring lightweight and low-vibration production equipment to higher floors, achieving a three-dimensional development concept. This idea was first proposed in Shenzhen in 2016. In November 2022, Shenzhen announced a 5-year plan for constructing quality industrial space through the industrial buildings model. From 2022, for 5 consecutive years, 20 million square meters of high-quality, low-rent, customizable industrial space will be built each year. All industrial buildings will have rent not exceeding 35 yuan per month per square meter, with annual rent increases not exceeding 5%. This marks the official launch of the massive industrial buildings movement. What does supplying 100 million square meters of industrial space over 5 years mean? It's equivalent to creating 2 new Shoko industrial zones each year. Since then, the most common sight in some industrial parks in Shenzhen is the big demolition character. Its rows of factories are demolished, high-rise buildings are erected. However, this seemingly frantic construction carries huge risks, and voices of doubt from the outside continue to emerge. Many industry insiders have shared their views. This factory broker commented on the market situation based on his knowledge.
Industrial buildings should be stopped. Building so many factories, who are you going to rent them to? I believe industrial buildings have several limitations. Firstly, the construction cost of industrial buildings has increased, about 40% more than before. Maintenance costs have also risen, and there's pressure on elevators. Will there be a surplus of factory buildings in 20 years? Secondly, companies with heavy equipment can't use these spaces. Most industrial buildings have basements, making it impossible for large and heavy machinery to be used. High-precision equipment affects stability, and ground floor rents are high. For a large industrial park with hundreds of thousands of square meters, there's only 1 or 2 ground floors. Experts say the heavy equipment can be placed upstairs, but in reality, many companies can't transport raw materials upstairs, increasing transportation costs, making these spaces unsuitable for use. Thirdly, after moving industries upstairs, a lot of the upper floor factory spaces remain vacant. New factories lower overall rents, and the only solution is to reduce prices. Fourthly, any product and industry must be suitable for the companies. Don't follow trends blindly. Who are you going to rent so many factory buildings to? There are already plenty of factory buildings, and now you've built these high ones. Who will rent them? Now they're all left unused, right?
Mr. Liu, the founder of Lanco Shenzhen Acoustics Technology Company Limited, also raised his doubts on social media. As a returning entrepreneur who grew up in Shenzhen, he is concerned about how the wealth created by the people of Shenzhen is being used. He consulted several experts on the industrial buildings issue and received an explanation he found most convincing. In recent years, with the macroeconomic downturn, local governments are under pressure to attract investment and boost the economy, and Shenzhen is no exception. However, Shenzhen has 2 shortcomings: a lack of land resources and the hope of many developers to convert the old empty industrial parks into commercial or residential land. Therefore, industrial buildings are actually a smart way to revitalize existing industrial land. For example, once an industrial land plot is included in the industrial buildings plan, the floor area ratio can be increased 5 to 6 times. The original plot is divided into 3 parts, 1/3 for building high-rise factories that meet the industrial buildings requirements, which can typically be over 10 or even 20 stories high, another 1/3 for constructing supporting residential apartments for sale, and the remaining 1/3 is returned to the government for free, thus giving the government additional land resources. This seems like a win-win situation. So, upon hearing this, he finally understood the main focus of industrial buildings is not on industry, but on buildings. Additionally, as an expert in innovative noise and vibration solutions, he believes that industrial buildings could cause serious noise and vibration problems. For example, the vibrations and noise generated by production equipment and machinery operating on different floors could affect the building's safety and comfort. More critically, there is a risk that the vibrations from numerous production and electromechanical equipment in the building could resonate, amplifying the vibration and noise sources, affecting the surrounding environment and the use of precision instruments. He questions whether investment institutions have thoroughly studied these issues. Furthermore, Shenzhen and its surrounding areas already have a large number of vacant factories. Now, by increasing the floor area ratio through industrial buildings, so much additional factory space is created out of thin air. In the current downturn of the manufacturing industry, who can afford to rent these high-cost factories? The government is bearing the significant cost of industrial buildings, with monthly rent capped at 35 yuan per square meter, while the government may cover short-term losses. Who will bear the long-term losses? Many netizens also believe it's a pity that some industrial parks in Shenzhen, with mostly new buildings, are suddenly being demolished.
This large building, over a dozen stories high, is about to be demolished. It's really a pity. And this one, and those behind it, they're all part of the industrial park, and they're all being demolished. This building too, you see, they're all part of the industrial park, and they're all set for demolition. This one has already been leveled. A few months ago, it was still a good factory. On one side, there's crazy construction. You see, these are all newly built, and they haven't even been sold yet. On the other side, there's crazy demolition. You see those banners? They all indicate pending demolition. From our perspective, it's really a waste. In a place like Shenzhen, where ordinary people can't even afford 1 square meter, these big enterprises can relocate entire square kilometers. Behind this is Huawei, and it's said the government helps them get land.
Some local industry insiders believe that Shenzhen's cage for birds strategy has already driven away a lot of manufacturing. Now, with industrial buildings, more and more industrial parks are being phased out, forcing many factories to relocate out of Shenzhen. These relocated factories are unlikely to return, and the newly built high-rise buildings are not suitable for factory production and office use, with rents too high for small factories to afford. So how can there be any industry moving into these buildings? Researcher at the China National High-End Think Tank Comprehensive Development Research Institute, Song Ding, believes that industrial building projects generally present issues of large investment, long cycles, high costs, high risks, and low returns. Both the park enterprises and the incoming enterprises still have concerns about the stability and sustainability of policies, whether the specific spatial layout and system meet production requirements, whether the comprehensive costs are controllable, and whether the supporting facilities are complete and capable of retaining people and enterprises. This leads to some market players still adopting a wait-and-see attitude. Additionally, the building design standards for industrial buildings projects are not yet complete, and a general technical standard system has not yet been established. Some new problems will inevitably arise during the development process. Managing Director of Heyuan City Renewal Group, Luo Yu, believes that the implementers of these projects are mostly traditional real estate companies, many of which still view industrial buildings with the simple logic of collecting rent. However, in reality, industrial buildings involve developing and operating new types of industrial parks. The core lies in servicing the industry, with overall revenue coming not just from rent, but also from industrial services and industrial investment. For traditional real estate companies transitioning to industrial real estate, it's akin to starting a new business in a new field. Therefore, they must use new field logic to handle new field matters. He believes that industrial parks are fundamentally different from commercial real estate and residential real estate. They require developers to operate the parks long-term to serve manufacturing enterprises and their employees. This represents a significant strategic shift for traditional real estate companies, requiring adjustments in investment logic, business models, development strategies, and organizational systems to adapt. This is precisely what the industry finds challenging. From a company's perspective, industrial buildings have 3 limiting conditions. Firstly, the industry prerequisite. Not all industries are suitable for moving into buildings. Industries best suited for moving into buildings are precision, light, and small industries. Precision, small, and light industries, characterized by light production, environmental friendliness, and low energy consumption. The production processes should be relatively simple, with minimal requirements for indoor space and fewer internal logistics pipelines, summarizing high-end intelligent manufacturing industries, including intelligent equipment and robotics and the Internet of Things, as well as small and medium-sized manufacturing enterprises, are more suitable for industrial buildings. Secondly, there's the product prerequisite. In industrial production, larger equipment requires higher standards for floor load capacity and ceiling height due to its weight and size. Therefore, the safety of high-rise industrial buildings must be prioritized. Additionally, the building techniques for high-rise industrial buildings, such as planning floor area ratio, building height, floor load, column spacing, and auxiliary production facilities, must meet much higher standards compared to traditional industrial buildings. This results in an average cost increase of more than 20%. This leads to the cost prerequisite for industrial buildings. For instance, in the recent Nanshan Intelligent Manufacturing Honghualing Industrial Park in Shenzhen, the construction cost reached 10,000 yuan per square meter, and the subsequent operational and maintenance costs were even higher. Therefore, the rent for industrial buildings is more than 30% higher than that of traditional industrial parks. This adds significant pressure on companies when deciding to move into these buildings. Industrial buildings initially originated in Singapore and Hong Kong due to their limited land and industrial space. These regions mainly focused on light industry, which suited high-rise factory buildings, leading to their emergence. Shenzhen became the birthplace of industrial buildings in China for similar reasons. However, the situation now is that not only Shenzhen but other areas in the Greater Bay Area, such as Dongguan, Guangzhou, and Zhuhai, are following suit. Shanghai has also adopted the industrial buildings model. With these two top-tier cities setting the trend, many other regions are jumping on the bandwagon, extensively promoting industrial buildings. Several cities in China, including Suzhou, Hangzhou, Ningbo, and Qingdao, have referenced and adopted Shenzhen's approach, introducing standardized policies and corresponding proposals. Industrial buildings seem to be becoming a new trend among local governments. Industrial buildings projects, which appear grand and prestigious, are popular among officials as they enhance their political achievements. These projects bring recognition, boost GDP through construction activities, and may even provide personal benefits and career advancement for the officials. Why wouldn't they pursue them? However, this rash, headlong rush into industrial buildings is short-lived. The current economic downturn has led to business closures or downsizing, resulting in an oversupply of industrial buildings and very high vacancy rates in many areas. Ultimately, industrial buildings may become the biggest joke locally.